God, we just want to say thank you for your blessings on us. We thank you for ministering to our needs and helping us to be interested in what's happening around this church, helping us to want to know what we can do to better this place, this community of faith. I pray, God, that you will help us by the end of the day to already have some answers, to, if we need a nudge, that we get it today. If we need to just stop for a second and take a breath, that we get that too. We just ask for your Spirit to guide us through all that we do today. Open our hearts, open our minds, and help us to hear you today. We ask in the name of Jesus our Christ and all things that are holy. Amen. I am so delighted to see this many people here. I'm so glad you're here, and I think there probably will be some other people coming in a few minutes. If you will notice your first sheet, size matters. Of course, I have my little doggies up there. I just thought that was precious. It does matter. Doesn't mean it's a good thing, a bad thing. Doesn't mean one's going to hurt the other. It just means size matters. You will see each of the slides in your folders up on the screen. So today we're going to talk a little bit about church size theory and size transitions. Now, I want to tell you that those of us who went to the Size Summit presented by Metropolitan Community Church, the denomination, it lasted for 2 days. The first part of the first day, they spent a couple of hours telling us about the research that had been done, all of that information that had gone before, and how they got to the information that I'm going to give you today. How about we make an agreement? I won't give you all of that theory today if you'll just trust that the people that have come before us knew what they were talking about, and this is the direction that our whole denomination is going in. So this part of it is what we all need to know. If you want to get the theory stuff, if you're really geeky and you like all of the theory behind all of that and all of the details, that's fine. There's a resource at the end that you can go back and find all of that. But is it okay if we just get to the nuts and bolts and the actual application, but tell you the tools that we need to manage that?
Yes.
All right, very good. So I'm not going to go through a lot of the theory, even though some of the theory is intertwined in here. You will see it come out. So what does size have to do with it? What's size got to do with it? Church size theory is a body of experience and observations about how every aspect, now pay attention to those two words, every aspect of a church's life changes according to its size. So every aspect of what happens around here, every aspect. Now think of all the components of what makes up a church. Every aspect, from the pastor, the people, the worship, the board, the programming, every aspect changes according to the size of the church. In order to help churches grow, not just numerically, but in their service to the larger community and in internal programming and spirituality, it doesn't help to group churches geographically or denominationally or even theologically. Wow. You would think that you would just group churches, we group by denominations, which would say something about theology, would it not? And then we tend to group churches in the South as being a little more conservative, don't we? But this is not just about how we grow with numbers, as far as the number of people coming, and in how we grow, it can't just be because we're in the South or we're more conservative. Ha 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 ha. So we're already fighting an uphill battle in the South, aren't we?
Amen.
But how do we fit in with the larger community, and how are we doing internally? What's happening inside? But when we look at groups of churches which are similar in size, okay, now, no matter where they are, if they're similar in size, we see that they face the same challenges, and that addressing the needs of a congregation according to its size is the most effective way to help it transition to the next numerical size. Okay, now, did you get that?
Yes.
Just let that sink in a little bit. If we look at other churches that are similar in size to us, and if, there's that big old word, if we decide we want to grow in numbers, in spirituality, in our community work, internally with our programming, if we decide we want to grow, then we can look at other churches in the same size that we are, and then see what they're doing to get to. In other words, this is not just about we're at this size, and by the time we get 100 more people in here, we'll be at the next size, so then we'll just start doing things differently. That would be really nice, but that doesn't work, because what works at one size doesn't work at another size. And if you're in the process, what was that I just said? Process. If you're in the process of growing, then you need to be the process of growing the transition. You got to get ready for the new people coming in. If you're cooking dinner and you're expecting 4 people to come over for dinner, and then 10 show up, but you haven't prepared for them, you freak out.
Yes.
They go hungry, and people are like, well, they sure weren't ready for me. They thought you were ready for everyone. Well, it happens the same way with church. Those of us that are here, that are already here, have to start preparing for those who aren't here yet. And we have to start acting in such a way. Now, there are 6 aspects of congregational life. There's the pastor. There is staffing. And currently, our staff involves a volunteer, that's Mike Smith, who comes in 1 day a week, at least, and answers phone, returns phone calls, checks mail, sorts mail, puts information into the computer. If you filled out the little yellow cards on Sunday, he gets those to the proper places. If it has a prayer request on it, it goes to the prayer team. If it just says for pastor's eyes only, he passes it to me. So that's, I'm 3/4 time, for those of you who don't know that. I'm not full time. I'm 3/4 time, which is 32 hours a week, and Mike is a volunteer. Just keep that in mind. That's our staff. We have a board of directors, which is currently 4 people plus the pastor. 4 congregants plus the pastor that are elected by the congregation. Another aspect is programming. Programming involves everything that happens besides worship. So it can be the music department, that can be a programming aspect. It can be anything we do for outreach. It can involve anything we do with social justice issues, human rights issues, anything that we do out there. Also, any educational classes, like being here today, is part of a program. Friday night Bible study, that's part of programming. The ushers are part of programming. The worship team that makes everything happen for worship, that includes the sound people, the light people, the video people, PowerPoint people, everything that happens in worship, all the ushers, acolytes, servers, prayer partners, all of that's part of programming. Everything that we do is part of programming. We have worship, and again, that entails all of the stuff that happens, but just the worship itself once everybody's in the room on currently Sundays at 11. And another aspect is the actual facilities. We currently are buying this building. And for those of you that have only been here for a year or two, several years ago, the sanctuary only came from there, that wall, to this door right here. That was offices at the front. And the social hall was not a social hall. It was 3 rooms. And so we spent some money, did some remodeling. That was supposed to take a couple of weeks and took almost a year.
Yeah.
But we got the walls taken out, new flooring put in, walls taken out in here, new flooring put in, new walls, and painting and stage and all sorts of things. We changed the direction of the worship. So facilities, but we are currently buying this building. So it is ours. Keep that in mind. Now, sustaining healthy growth. There are 4 things to look at when you're talking about church health. Lately, people, when I was going through years and years ago, first came into MCC, the whole rage was talking about church growth, church growth. We went to more workshops on church growth. How do you grow a church? How do you grow a church? How do you grow a church? And we tried everything, and a lot of it worked, and some of it didn't. But it wasn't always sustaining, because we were just looking at numbers. We weren't looking at health. And so then the newest emerging church kind of idea is that you really need to be talking about, instead of church growth, you talk about church health. Because if you get a healthy church, something that's healthy grows on its own. So that's the idea behind that. So what is sustaining a healthy growth? Well, you want growth numerically. Some people do, not everybody does. Some people want to have more people here. Diaconally, you know what that means? That means, like at our church, it's called a care team. It means how we take care of one another, how we respond if somebody's sick, if somebody is reaching out, if someone has a problem or an issue, just sort of taking care of each other. In other denominations, they call them deacons. It would be the work of a deacon, and what the scriptures say that work is: reaching out to people that are grieving, working out to people who are sick, that kind of thing. Organically. Well, organically is what springs up from within to go without. So what is keeping us healthy on the inside that can then spring up to go out? And then spiritually, of course. Spiritual growth. And I don't know about you. I tell people I gave my heart to God when I was 5 years old, and I've been growing ever since. So I am very spiritually obese, just so you know. All right. Any questions up to this point? Any comments up to this point? Okay. So let's look at church size. Notice the first thing. Church size is not based on the number of members you have, but rather is based on attendance. Church size is based on attendance. Now, if you look over there at the board, you see our attendance last Sunday was 66. When Morris does the monthly report and hands it to me to sign off to send into the denomination, sometimes I look at it and it's like this. One Sunday we'll have 54, and the next Sunday we'll have 84. Who can figure out what all of that's about other than a ball game or something? Work schedules, sickness, people out of town on vacation, holidays. It just happens. I mean, it just, it just goes all over the place. So Someone asked me recently, how many people do you have that regularly attend your church? One of the elders asked me. And I said, we have about between 150 and 200 people that attend our church with some regularity. And yet on any given Sunday, we may go from 50 to 90. Why is that? Because some people come like once a month. Some people come every couple of months. And sometimes it's based on all sorts of factors. Sometimes it's based on work schedules. We have a couple people that would love it if we had a Sunday night service or if we had a Tuesday night service because they work every Sunday. Well, then, maybe that's something we have to look at in the future. Maybe that's something to think about and discuss. However, in talking about this, you think about this, what if we all got to church at the same time on the same day? What would we look like? This place, we have 150 chairs in here. I've only seen it full once. On our 25th anniversary Sunday morning when Troy Perry, the founder of our denomination, came to celebrate our anniversary. So keep in mind that we have a lot of people that are associated with our church in some way. Currently, though, look at the size, 50 to 80 is about what we're running. Now look at the sizes that all of the theory and all of that stuff that was back there that was studied before came up with. If you are up to 50 people on a regular basis, 0 to 50 people, well, I guess it would be 1 to 50 people. That's called a family size church. Makes sense, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Family size church. From 50 people to 150 people is a pastor size church. You have one of those.
Yeah.
From 150 people to 350 people is called a program size church. And when you have over 350 people, it's called a corporate size church. So where do you think we fit in? We are pastor size, although we still have some people that are in that family size thinking, especially people that have been here a long time, have watched it grow from being a family size to a pastor size. For you newer folks that have just come in the last year or so, you're like, oh, that's easy. We're pastor size church. You don't even see it probably, the stuff that goes along with a family size. Well, we're going to see what happens and see where we actually, by all of those aspects we were talking about a while ago, we're going to see by the end of this workshop where we actually fit, where we are synchronized and where we're off. Because the whole point of the church size is that if you've got, remember programming, pastor, worship, board of directors, all of that stuff that we just went over, if you've got 2 of those working on family size and 2 of them working on pastor size and 2 of them working on program size, family pastor program, you're out of sync. So over the last few weeks, when I've said we need to get on the same page, it's because we're actually out of sync. And it would run a whole lot smoother, and we would be a little bit, maybe a whole lot healthier if we're all operating on the same level. You cool with that? A few facts, and we're going to get back to those. We're going to describe in detail those 4 churches. Okay? So don't panic. Church size in the United States, just in the United States, 59% of United States congregation have under 100 regular participants. That's adults and children. Now think about that. And think about how many churches are look in this neighborhood, right around, we're in the industrial area. We're not even out there in the mainland, and we're not out in the suburbs. We are here in the industrial, and we could step outside and holler to 5 different churches.
And hear them having church.
This way, that way, behind us. There's 2 behind us, although one's for sale. One across the street over here, one right beside of us, and one across the street from them. All of us right here. 6 churches on a block in an industrial area beside the waste plant management plant. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Churches everywhere. And yet, isn't that fact true about every one of these churches right here? Under 100 people in worship at any given time. Any one of us. 71% of United States congregations are under 100 regular participants if you're only counting adults. That means a lot of people got some children's church and their parents are dropping the children off and leaving, coming back and picking them up. But only 26% have attendance over 100. 9% of U.S. churches have attendance over 350 when you get into the mega church stuff. Not a whole lot. Under 10% of U.S. congregations contain more than 50% of churchgoers. So in other words, most people are going to a family size or pastor size church. Very few in the United States have moved forward to a quarter of churches in the United States have moved to the programming size, and less than 10% go to a megachurch or a corporate sized church. Pretty interesting facts. So let's talk about some advantages of having a large church, because there are advantages to having a large church, generally speaking. They provide resources sufficient for quality programming. I will tell you that as this size church, and I was the pastor of a family size church in Chattanooga when I went there, family size is still family size. Here, pastor size, generally speaking. Even now, in the last couple of weeks, I reached out to a program and a corporate-sized church to get resources for our church. I reach out to them because they have it in place. How do I do this? I call one of the pastors of the larger churches. How do we do this? How do we incorporate this? How do I make this happen? But notice what I just said. How do I? Oh, that's pastor-centered. How do I make it happen? Okay. But they generally have resources. Their facilities and numbers offer more effective outreach. They can do more out there because they have a lot more people, and the more people you have inviting other people or going out to help. You know, one of the mega churches here in town, I was so impressed a while back that when they did an interview with the pastor, one of the things that they do as a ministry, and I don't know if it's a regular thing that they do, but on Saturday nights, a lot of times they go out to areas of town that have bars that are very busy and hand out water at 2 o'clock in the morning. So people can have water and try to sober up before they start driving home. So you imagine if they get 25 of their congregants to go out to the bars and be awake at 2 o'clock in the morning to hand out water, that means they're not getting home till 3:30, 4 o'clock. They're probably not going to be at church the next morning. Imagine 25 people missing from our congregation on Sunday morning because they've been out at 3 o'clock in the morning handing out water. If you have 1,000 people, that 25 is not so bad. But if you have 50, all right, take all of that into account. Larger churches achieve efficiency of resources. So they generally will tweak things because they have more time and they experiment more and they do it in smaller groups. So if you have this group doing, and I can give you an example. Reverend Sandy Osteen at Cornerstone, she has just revamped their Rainbow Council because it was too big. It was going in so many different directions for the size church she has. So she revamped it, she tweaked it some, and it's working very effectively. When I first came here, I'm trying to remember, we had, was it 6 or 8 people on the board besides the pastor? So we had 6 people. We were running 40 and 45 in church in attendance, but we had 6 people on the board. So each person represented only a handful of people. So one of the things I suggested was we need to bring the size of the board down to the size of the church and get some of those people involved in other things. Not that we put them out the pasture, mind you, we just, So, as we grow, though, we'll have to do the reverse. We add to as you grow. So we make it more efficient. Large churches offer an assembly of smaller congregations in the same stage of life. One of the things that I hear from people in a small church that don't want it to be a large church, they will say, but I'm losing touch with everybody. I don't know everybody's name anymore. And I don't necessarily like those small groups. That means I have to come at a different time. And yet, we just said, some people said, oh, I'd come if we had a Tuesday night worship. Well, then that would be a Tuesday night small group. Some of you were like lighting up when I said that Mike was going to teach a CLM class. Oh, I'd like to come and be a part of that. And when I said Linda was going to do a Bible study at her house on Friday nights, oh, that's something I could get involved with. Well, if she has 20 people come, or even 15 people come, that's a small group ministry, you see. That's part of that small congregation kind of thing. But larger churches can have a lot more of those and tailor it. I'll give you an example. Someone contacted me recently that doesn't come to our church that asked, do you have an LGBT and affirming grief support group? And I said, no, we don't. Now, I referenced him to a group that is accepting of LGBT people, but we don't have that. Now, I could have advertised it, and we may have had 2 people show up. But when you're starting that kind of support group, you need somebody in place to lead it. You need somebody in place that knows how to hold it together, manage it, decide how long it's going to go or if it's going to be ongoing. And that doesn't always happen in a smaller church. If we were a huge church, you'd have a handful of people to start with. That would be a small congregation that needed that for that time period. See how that works? Another example of this is feeding. When I first came here, I interviewed, for those of you who are new, I interviewed the congregation when they interviewed me to be their pastor. Because I wanted to know, where do you see this church in 5 years? Because that's going to make a difference in my decision as to whether I'm coming here or not. I need to know what I'm getting into. What is it that you want? And I took notes. I had a form and I filled it out on every person's answer. I still have them. I can pull them out and show them what they said. Because I'm going to tell you, some of those people have changed their minds about what they like. And that's not horrible. We're open to change our minds. There's nothing bad about that. But some of them found out when we started getting what they liked or what they thought they liked, they didn't like it so much. So then they pulled back. It's important to know what you like, but it's also to have a goal out there of saying where we're going. But one of the things that people wanted was a feeding program and an LGBT center. They wanted a rainbow center here. We want a gay and lesbian center right here. And 20 years ago, those were the rage. Now, not so much. But what has happened is, instead of us being called the LGBT Center, we have become a safe space, and we've become something called the Freedom Center, that every group in town is able to come and meet and be in a safe space. So while it didn't look like what we thought it was going to look like back then, it actually has come to fruition, because there's a trans group that meets here every month. There's two political groups that meet here. There are 3 AA groups that meet here. Pride Fest meets here. And anything that we do with church. Gamma Alpha Psi, African American Lesbian Fraternity. All of those things meet here. Why? Because it's a safe space, and it's called Freedom Center. Cool. The food cart, we could not do a feeding program. Our kitchen is not set up for it. We'd have to redo the whole kitchen to make that happen. But we have a cart in there, and I don't know who started that ministry. It was here before I got here. But there's a making groceries, grocery cart in there. And when I first got here, there was a church, Hope United Methodist, sent out an invitation to pastors all over town, including us, and invited me to come over one day. They fed us lunch, and they gave us a whole workshop about what was happening that day at Hope Ministries. They showed us their facility. They have a grocery store set up right there. They work with families that come in that are unemployed, don't have a place to live. Some of them are on the streets. They help them with job skills, with getting their lives, their bodies cleaned up, help them find a way to be resourceful into getting into their own places to live, their own transportation, and their own jobs. And this is like an 18-month program that people sign up for. So it's not just we're helping you this week, and they help them learn how to do that. Well, you know what? We can't do all of that. We're just not big enough financially or people-wise, staff-wise. We just can't do it. What we can do is still have an outreach food ministry by having that cart in there, and once a month people taking that food over to Hope Ministries and putting it on their grocery shelves so that people can actually go into their grocery store and not be limited by what they can buy. Interesting. So we found a way. We found a way. All right, moving on. Now, there are 9 significant factors that affect growth in large churches. We're still talking about large churches. See how this fits with us. I was looking at it doing little check marks. See how many you got. Most significant factors that affect growth in large churches. We're not there yet, but large churches. They're located in the suburbs. What are the suburbs? Where lots of families live in clusters. Look at our neighborhood. Industrial. Not a lot of residential stuff around us. 2, offering a variety of social activities. We used to have a social club here. And occasionally somebody steps up and says, I'd like to do so-and-so. And I'm like, great, let's do it. And if they decide to do it, then we do it. And if they decide somebody else has got to do it, then it doesn't get done. Number 3, attention to social justice issues. Notice that's not limited to GLBT stuff. Social justice issues. Human rights. They are denominationally loyal. There's a clear sense of mission. They know exactly why they're there. There's a reason they're there. They're all going towards the same goal. They have well-organized programs. They have relevant and uplifting worship. They are nurtured spiritually, meaning their spiritual life gets taken care of. They're able, something's offered, they're able to feed themselves. Worship options include contemporary style and music, contemporary music. Keep that in mind. Large churches. And when I say large, and what I believe, if I remember this correctly, it wasn't just talking about the mega churches. It was talking about programming, program size, and corporate size, as opposed to family and pastor size. Okay?
You talked about being located in the suburbs. Was there any of the black mega churches included in this? Because they're not generally located in the suburbs.
These statistics were taken from all U.S. churches.
Okay. And what do you mean by denominational loyalty?
Meaning that a lot of times as churches grow, most churches, just like in our denomination, we pay in a certain amount of our finances. I believe is what, 12%? 12% of our income on a scale goes into the denomination that pays for the elders and the workshops and our leadership. However, sometimes churches decide to become an independent church and not belong to any denomination. So they keep their finances, they keep their programming. They miss out on the programming that comes from the denomination, but they just become an independent entity. And I've seen that happen with a lot of mega churches in the past, but then, I shouldn't say a lot of mega churches, with some mega churches. However, that doesn't happen with all of them. The majority, obviously, according to the statistics of most churches that were considered large, that's programming and corporate size, which would be roughly 35% of churches in the United States. So a third of churches in the United States belong to a denomination that they are loyal to. They don't want to become an independent church. I don't want to become an independent church. We'd have more money in our pockets, but we wouldn't have the resources and the fellowship.
Okay, and that's a question too about apportionments. Is MCC considered connectional? Or is it considered each church is a church, an entity? Okay, are they more like the United Methodists or are they more like the Southern Baptists?
I don't know the answer to that question because I'm not familiar enough with their structures. We are a denomination that is set up internationally, and we're connected by networks of churches. So our network is led by yours truly, the Southern Gulf Coastal Network, and there are networks all over. So our network goes around the Southern Gulf Coast, which stretches from Mobile, Alabama to Corpus Christi, Texas. So that's our region. So we're interconnected more specifically with those churches, even though there's we try to have like regional meetings once a year, that kind of thing. I'm not sure if I answered your question yet. We are but that doesn't mean we can only associate with those churches. We can certainly have fellowship with any churches.
Okay, now if a church were to decide to do things differently from other MCC churches, would they be kicked out of the denomination like some of the Baptist churches were?
Most churches in the MCC are very unique and are pretty much autonomous as far as the way they operate. However, there is a certain group of very basic guidelines that we all buy into, or we wouldn't be part of the denomination anyway.
Okay.
So
the denomination could not close us down.
You want to answer that?
The denomination can close us down if we violate some very specific things, and tends to be based on size. If we reach a size that is considered non-viable, then the denomination has the opportunity to come in and say that you don't have enough people attending to be considered an active church.
What he was saying is, yes, if a church gets so far down in attendance and finances, the denomination could come in and say, we need to evaluate with you whether you are strong enough to become, grow back up to become a church, if it's viable as a congregation. Perhaps it needs to close down as a church and just be a Bible study group in someone's home. Doesn't mean you tell people you can never, you're not church and so you can't meet together. That's not what that's about. It means that perhaps you're not large enough to be a church and operate as a church, and try to seek a pastor to lead you. Perhaps you work very well as a group in a home, as a Bible study, or not meaning you can't come together and worship. You can certainly do that. But the denomination does have guidelines as to what constitutes a church.
How do you think we fit into that situation?
We are not anywhere close to being shut down. We're very healthy, I think, personally. I think we're very healthy. Do we have a ways to go? Absolutely. What's the first step in making that happen? You got a letter from Morris about finances, but that's only one part of it. This is why I want us to get on the same page, so we can decide what we want to be. It's very sobering sometimes to really look at the bottom line and say, this is what we are right now. That doesn't mean we need to close down. Somebody I think took his letter and said, oh my God, we're in danger of shutting down. Well, yes and no. From a financial standpoint, it does mean it's a wake-up call that we have to step up, or we can't go forward. It will only hamper us. It will keep holding us back. Other questions or comments? We want everybody to stay focused. All right. Let's look at the 10 strengths related to church growth. Now notice this is not just for large churches. This is for church growth of any kind. Church growth involves growing spiritually. Hopefully, when you come here, you're getting some kind of spiritual food, and that's nourishing you and helping you to move forward. Meaningful worship. And Lord, since I'm in charge of worship, I hope you find it meaningful. Y'all are always very complimentary of worship. And every Sunday, Miss Blanche tells me I'm the best pastor she ever had. And she'll be 90 years old. And she's been in church most of her life. So that you don't know how much that means to me. Having a sense of belonging. People feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. Sharing faith. That this is a place where you can feel free to express what your faith is and share it with others and not be judged. Empowering leadership. Meaning one person doesn't hold all the reins. They're willing to let go of something and let other people lead. And I will tell you, one of the biggest things that we pastors constantly have to do is, if somebody you hand something off to someone and let them do it their way as opposed to your way. That doesn't mean not with no guidelines or regulations, because we all have that, all of us. We're bound by certain things. But I remember, this wasn't at this church, and it wasn't me as the pastor, but I had a former pastor who used to do the church bulletin every Sunday. They handed out a bulletin in service program every Sunday. And that person that's what he did for a living, was make everybody's paperwork look really great He worked for businesses on the side and did all of this, great, wonderful stuff. But when he started pastoring full-time from being part-time, he had to let some things go because he just didn't have time. And as the church grew, he had to let that go. And I remember every time when he passed it off to someone else and it didn't come out the way he used to do it, he would just cringe. And it's like, oh, I just want to do that. I just need to fix that. I just need to fix it. He didn't do that in front of the person who had volunteered to do it, by the way. But I worked with them on staff, so I got to hear it, and he could say that to me, and it was okay. And we'd just say, it's all right. It's all right, because it looks good. No, it's not the way you would have done it, but it looks good. It's very presentable. Other people liked it, and it was just exactly what some people were looking for. Imagine that. Caring for children and youth. We lag on this. However, we don't have as many children and youth as the general church, so keep that in mind. I'm not making excuses. I'm calling attention to the realities of who we are. Focusing on the community. Now, you can look at that in several ways. Focusing on the geographical community that we live in, focusing on the GLBTQ and affirming community. We're not so good at the geographical stuff. We're very good at the GLBT stuff. Looking to the future. I'll just hold my head down like this right now. Oh, that's what we're doing here today. Welcoming new people. And most of the people that are here today will say, oh, people were really friendly to me when I came here. People have always been very nice to me. And I'm going to tell you, we live in such a wonderful and strange and horrible day where we have some people that walk in the door that their way, what they call welcoming, is if they can walk in, nobody says a word to them, they can just sit down, have a nice worship experience, and they can get up and leave and nobody bothers them. Don't even touch them. And then there are others that find the welcoming only if you have just bypassed shaking their hand and introduced themselves. You've just grabbed them and hugged them and said, oh no, we hug around here. And I'm going to tell you something. As a person who is very affectionate and likes hugging and all of that stuff, there are still some things that are very off-putting to me when I go to a new church. When St. John's MCC was my home church and in Raleigh, North Carolina, and when we started, we had a Sunday evening worship because we rented from another church, and they had Sunday morning worship, so we had Sunday night worship. When we bought our own building, we decided we were going to add a Sunday morning service. So we'd have Sunday morning and Sunday night service. So what we did, and I love precious Wayne Lindsay, Reverend Wayne Lindsay was my pastor. He said, well, let's do our homework. Imagine that. So he got the worship team together, and every Sunday morning for several months, we went somewhere else to church in what were considered growing churches in the Raleigh area. Didn't matter what denomination it was. If they were considered growing churches, we went. We wanted to see what they were doing, so we knew how to make our Sunday morning service. Well, you might as well start with a growing one, hadn't you? And don't go find one that's falling off the earth, right?
Mystery shopping.
Go find, right, mystery shopping. That's a good term. And so it was amazing, though, going in as visitors, the reception that some of us got. At one church we went to, I remember, this lady walked up to us as soon as we stepped inside the door and just grabbed us and hugged us. And I mean, and I'm like, whoa, hello first, hi, my name is. She just grabbed me and hugged me, and I was like, she just escaped from somewhere. As much as I love hugging and all of that affection, I was really uncomfortable. And as someone who grew up in church, it's hard to make me uncomfortable in church. And I will tell you something that happened to me at this church. When I came, Before I came here as the pastor, I was here at one point when Reverend Dexter was here as interim, and he had a 24-hour prayer vigil. And I signed up since I was in town. I signed up for some odd hour in the middle of the night where most people don't want to be here, because I was on LA time anyway. It didn't much matter to me. And the person, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but some of you are going to know, and I wish he was here today. But the person who came in right before me, or right after me, remembered me from when I had been here right after Hurricane Katrina. I didn't remember him. I mean, I'd seen him, I guess, in church, but he remembered seeing me, but I didn't remember him. And he walks over as I'm coming up from prayer, and he's going into prayer, and just kisses me right in the mouth. And I'm like, who are you? And why did you do that? I mean, you're cute and everything, but, you know, just kind of caught me off guard, you know? We have to be really careful about how we welcome people. There are ways to do that. And here's the other thing we need to be aware of. I'm just putting this out there for any size church. We need to be strategic about how we welcome people. We really need to be strategic about it. We need to be able to say, hello, my name is, without even offering a handshake if we sense that they are non-touchable. And don't just go up and hug strangers. And let people know that they really are welcome. But obviously, if you've been out a few Sundays and someone is sitting by you and you haven't seen them, that may not be their first Sunday. But you can always say, I haven't been here the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you've been or not, but if this is your first time, I just wanted to say hello, and here my name is. So that, you know, and make sure we cover every new person that comes in. To just say hello. Not throw yourself out. Say hello. Be friendly. I actually had a person, I met someone who actually lives out of town, but comes here to work some, and he said to me recently, not knowing I was the pastor of this church, I didn't tell him who I was first, and he said to me, I went to this, I said, he was talking about his faith and how he was involved in his church, which happened to be Cornerstone in Mobile, and I said, oh really, what kind of church you go to? Oh, it's an MCC, have you heard of them? I said, yes, I've heard of them. I said, we have one here in town. Have you been to the one here in town when you stay in town for the weekend? He said, yes, I went one time. He said, but you know, it just didn't feel like home. And I just didn't find the people there that friendly. And my heart just went into my stomach. And he said, and you know, most churches, when you go for the first time, you fill out something, and during that first week, you get a phone call and a letter from the church. And I didn't get either one of those. So I just figured, well, I guess they're happy with who they are. They don't need me. Now, I can tell you that probably a letter was sent. Well, a card was sent. Either, and this was back when I was doing the cards. So I can tell you that the card was sent. But he was in the transit, he was moving during that time, and it never got to him. Now, we don't do phone calls, we don't have that set up, but we do have a process by, if you fill out, you get a card during that week, a handwritten card that says, welcome, we're glad. And some of you may have gotten it, and some of you may not have. And maybe some of you don't remember if you got it or not. But if you didn't get it, and you're relatively new with us, let me know. If that's falling through the cracks, maybe we need to get a whole team of people to make sure that happens. Because, you know, sometimes the people in charge get sick or get busy, and who knows, maybe it is falling through the cracks. But we all need to pay attention to that kind of thing. I think it's important to get something, but you also don't want to dog people. And what I said a while ago, we live in a wonderful and horrible time because we're not mind readers. We don't know if they want to be touched or if they want to be left alone. We don't know if they want us to just shower them with attention or if they just want to say thank you and walk away. We don't know if they want, if they get a phone call or a note that they're going to think, those people will not leave you alone. I just went to visit. Give me a minute to think. Or if they're disappointed because they didn't get something. We're not mind readers. We're not going to satisfy everybody. What we do have to depend on is if they get a smile, if they get something, spirit touches them in worship. I depend on that phenomena a lot. Or if they're like Vicki has said, they know what we're about from the start. This is a safe space. Good things are happening here. And it may not be my faith, but it works for me to be a part of this community. I think that's really powerful. So the message is going out there somehow or another. Let's just make sure we're all part of it. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. So if you need restrooms, water, and then we'll take the next section of our class. Okay, let's look at the next section. Church size theory is a body of experience and observations about how churches behave differently at different sizes and how they can get stuck at size transition. Get stuck. And I don't know how you feel, but I have felt for 2 years stuck. Now, not everybody feels that way, but those of us that have been around a while know what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at the 4 different sizes, and maybe that will help you see. The most distinctive characteristics of each type of church. The family-sized church generally has matriarchs and or patriarchs. Do you know what matriarchs or patriarchs are? The head of the family. Okay, the head of the family. The pastor-sized church, the pastor's role as coordinator of all activities. In the program-sized church, it moves to people that are lay leaders. They have been empowered to do things, and then they lead. They become sort of like assistant pastors or that kind of thing. And in the corporate size, they have multiple, many congregations. In looking at our own church, people that have been around a while may see elements of at least 3 of those groups. Do you see them? Yeah. When we did the Rainbow Council, that was in the program-sized church, where I had a bunch of different leaders and they were leading other groups and doing all sorts of things. Some of those were successful and are still successful. The prayer team, for example, prayer care team. Julia's leading that. And I'm going to tell you, if you call and say, I'm in the hospital, you'll start getting phone calls or visits from people on that team, if at all possible. If one of them can get there, they will. That doesn't just come to me. But that means there has to be some way of getting word to them, of course, and then you being connected enough so we know how to reach you. Let's go to the other extreme, the matriarchs and patriarchs. Do we have matriarchs or patriarchs here? Yeah. One of the things that you learn in this is that there are matriarchs and patriarchs that are domineering and lead everything, and it has to be their way or no way. And then there are matriarchs and patriarchs who work with. They just happen to be in leadership because they're smart. And they love and have a burden for the church. So from the perspective of pastor, I say, yes, we have a patriarch at this church. In fact, 2. One more behind the scenes, one up in front a lot. Who am I talking about? Tom and Rick. Tom and Rick. And Tom is the main patriarch of this church. Has been for years. The reason that, by the way, we did this before. Tom is not here today because he's still healing from surgery, not because I was going to call him out. He knew I was going to call him out. He's okay with that. Just so you know, Rick's okay with that. Because he doesn't work against. He's never once, as long as I've been pastor of this church, he's never once come to me and said, I'm overriding you. He's never once gone behind the scenes and tried to pull people away from whatever I needed to happen. I've never once had to go to him and say, I'm going to do such and such a program. What do you think? Should I or shouldn't I? Whatever I've presented, he's worked with me. I don't care if he agreed with me or not, and sometimes he didn't. And most of the time I didn't know until much later, but he's worked with me. That's the kind of matriarch, patriarch you want. You want that kind of leadership. That's not a bad thing. So that's the reason I put you on the spot back there. It's like, yes, we all know that Tom is the patriarch of this church, and Rick as much, but just not as vocal. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing. Now, a lot of the newer folks probably don't even know that because you haven't been here long enough or been on the inner workings. But Tom is over buildings and grounds, and as he has said more than once, he'll come over here and we have all these groups. Larry comes even more than he was coming. He used to come once or twice a week to clean the church, but we have lots of groups that come to the church, and sometimes things get out of order. Tom will come over here and clean the toilet. He hires somebody to do that at his house. But he'll do it here because he loves this church that much. You go around the church, you look on that wall. He did that. He and Rick did that. They financed that. They financed if you go around and look at all the pictures around the walls, the history, 25 years of history, they did that in honor of the 25th anniversary. All those pictures he's been collecting all these years of different events. Why are they there? Not just so he can have his name on a plaque. He's never once asked for recognition. He didn't ask me to recognize him for that. I just did, because you want those kind of people around. You want those people that are willing to not just talk about it, but pay for it, suggest something if you're kind of lost, but not work against you. Notice that we've got the extreme from the family size. We have some elements of that. But we also have from the programming side, that extreme. But the majority of things that happen, and this is going to sound a little egotistical, forgive me, the pastor's role as coordinator of all activities. Yeah. If I miss a Sunday at lunch, when we go out to lunch, people are like, where's the pastor? Why didn't he show up? If I have a Good Friday service planned and I let somebody else take it and I wouldn't show up, can you imagine? Well, what are we paying him for? Isn't he supposed to be here 3/4 time? Why aren't we paying him 3/4 time? Everybody, and if somebody gets sick and in the hospital, who do they want to see?
The pastor.
The pastor. Even if though we have a prayer care team, that one of them will show up, and it wouldn't matter, I think, if the whole, for some people, not everybody's this way, but for some people, even if the whole prayer team shows up, if 20 people are sitting outside the emergency room, and one by one go back in there and have prayer, they would say, well, nobody from church came to see me. Meaning the pastor. They expect the pastor to do it. But now think about if we have, now that's when we have the number of people that we have. if we have regularly attending 150 people, 200 people, can I get to the hospital to see everybody?
Yes.
Can I take care of everybody's weddings and funerals and, you know, some people say I can, some people say I can't. I can tell you personally that I cannot. And I will say to you that it's unreasonable to expect that. That's not reasonable. Because do you, and here's, let me tell you why. I worked in corporate size church before I came here. I was one of 4 pastors, and I was hired specifically not to be in the pulpit, but to be the minister of congregational care. So I did the hospitals. I did all of the pastoral care sessions. I don't do counseling because legally pastors can't do counseling unless you have a degree in counseling. But I do have a pastoral care session that I'm willing to do with people, and then if it's going to last more than a couple of visits, we're going to recommend you to a certified counselor that's beyond my education. So what do? I did a whole job. That was my whole job, dealing with that in that size church. And I couldn't even do it all myself. I had to empower. We had deacons at that church. So I had to empower deacons. I was constantly teaching and working with deacons so that they could go out. And I was reassigning people. I was like, you do not know how many needy people there are in this world. And I will tell you, they find the church and they expect the pastor to be able to work miracles for everything in their lives. And I'm not saying that we're not here to walk that road with you. If you lose your job, if you lose your best friend, if you lose your partner, if you're going through divorce, if your mama dies, I'm telling you, we're here to go through that with you. However, the bigger you get, the less you can count on one person to be able to give you all of the time. There's some of you that I've been close to your parents when they passed, and I've gone and sit with your parents for hours. But if we were a corporate-sized church, I personally could not do that with every single person. I couldn't do it. It's just not reasonable. You can't do it. You have to hire other staff to take care of that kind of stuff. But I will say this. Now, I'm not complaining about us being a pastor-sized church. Now, you need to hear that. Because most, let me back that out, not most. Pastors have to be in the size churches that they are in for it to flow. Remember the congruence a while ago? The pastor needs to be in the size and be level and in sync too. And if the church is growing, the pastor's got to be growing. If the pastor's not, then you need a new pastor, one that's willing to grow with you. So it works both ways. It's not, we're all in this together. In other words, there's not just you and me. It's all got to work together. Otherwise, it's out of sync. There are 3 elements of church culture that determine a congregation's type: the size of the church, the relationship style, and the leadership structure. Now keep those 3 things in mind: the size of the church, the relationship style, and the leadership structure. Let's talk about those 3 things. It's called the congruence theory. Until all 3 elements are congruent, a church cannot be healthy, function effectively, or transition to the next size. And notice that first thing, because it doesn't mean you got to do all 3, but for it to work at all, for any one of those things, for it to be healthy, you got to be congruent with those things. For it to function effectively, it's got to be congruent. To transition to the next size, got to be congruent. All right, let's look at some elements of these different size churches. Let's look at that small church. family-sized church, 1 to 50 people. It's a single cell church in relationship style. Single cell. And the leadership structure is individual. Usually a matriarch or a patriarch or some combination, but it's individuals that lead in the structure. All right? The relationship style, one group consists of tightly knit extended families or clans that center on matriarchs and patriarchs. Think about that and what we were just talking about. People that follow certain people. Extended family units. This is my whole social life. This is where I not only come and receive my spiritual needs, but this is my extended family right here. And the leadership structure, the family matriarchs and patriarchs make the decisions. The pastor is either part-time generally or retired and functions as the chaplain. They generally take orders from patriarch or matriarch, or at least work within the framework that the matriarch or patriarch plans out. The board conducts business and ministries in support of the matriarchs and the patriarchs. That doesn't mean the matriarch or patriarch has to be on the board. The example one of them gave to us when we took this class was that the matriarch or patriarch, even if they're not on the board, will show up at board meetings though. And when it comes time to vote, the board members will generally look in the direction of the matriarch or patriarch to see which way they should vote. Other staff is usually a musician, is part-time and performs a limited but essential function. And we're even handicapped with that at the moment. All right, let's go to the next size. Oh, this is us. 51 to 150. We're the medium-sized church. We're still a single cell. One large group centers on the pastor, with some members in loosely knit functional or friendship circles. Some of you are sitting here with your closest friends. You hang out together, you go out together, you do things together outside of church. That's okay, nothing wrong with that. Some of you come to church and have a little group of people that you are always with out in the smoking area. There's a smokers group out there that I cannot tangle with. I'm not a smoker. I know when I've walked up on something, I can say hello and wave and move on. I am not in that club. Our leadership structure is still individual. The pastor is the hub of the wheel, the master coordinator, the chief minister. Yep, that's me. And just so you know, I like it. I like the attention. I like the world to revolve around me. I'm just selfish like that. Why you think the church is set up this way? You can all see me. I have my audience. The board members are short-term task doers, micro decision makers. The ministry coordinators are permanent task doers who value close working relationship with the pastor.
Amen.
Other staff, usually a musician and a secretary, you're a secretary now, is part-time and performs limited but essential functions. Program is 151 to 350. We're closer to that programming group than a lot of people think we are, because you can't just base it on the number of people that were here at one time. The relationship style. There are 2 or more distinct worshiping congregations, include 1/3 of all members in small groups of 5 to 15 people that center on skilled and empowered staff or lay leaders. So we not necessarily have one service. We might move to 2 services. Or we might have one service and some kind of midweek or other time in the week type, distinguished, totally different than what we do on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. Something. And that may stay the same or it may change. When I came to this church, there was a Wednesday evening study of some sort. It might have been Bible study, it might have been life skills, but there was something at 7 o'clock every Wednesday night. And what we found out with the programming, what I discovered here is we would offer such and such a class that was going to be 4 weeks, and we'd have 25 people come, 15 to 25 people come all 4 weeks. And then we would offer something else that was going to last for the next 4 weeks, and 3 people would come, 2 people would come, and they were the same people that came to it the last time we offered it. It's like, how many times can you study that without and then they ended up just talking over each other, teaching it to each other because they had already been through the class and they already knew all the answers, so they already, just shared all of their wisdom, and it wasn't very successful. It gave them a place to be, I guess, and made them feel good that they had all the answers, but it wasn't really helping the church to move forward as a group. So programming is a whole different story, but that's what I wanted to say. If there's something going on that is quality, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. It can be something different. It can be a 4 weeks of this and a 6 weeks of that, or a weekend of this, as opposed to just the regular service on Sunday morning. And then look at the leadership structure. It changed from individual. It's no longer a matriarch or patriarch. It's no longer a pastor. It is a collaborative group. Uh-oh. Now you've thrown something in there. Program groups, teams, committees have their own empowered lay leaders and plan and implement groups and activities. Didn't see pastor written up there in any of that. Didn't see matriarch or patriarch written in any of that. Board members are managers, policy makers who oversee but do not lead the programs. They put policies in place, and then it's up to the lay leaders to take those policies and figure out a way to make that, stretch that, every way they can grow it. They find a way. They're policy makers who oversee but do not lead the program groups, the teams, or the committees. The pastor functions as the executive, and other staff, one or more who are ordained, includes full and part-time assistants to the pastor and program resources. That's a dual-edged sword. And I will tell you, let me talk from the other side, not the congregation. Let me talk from the pastor side. One of the things that they have found out with the size summits is that some of our pastors in MCC do not want to be a corporate pastor. They don't like a big church. They like smaller churches. They like working with matriarchs or patriarchs. So they like moving from family-sized church to family-sized church. And if the church wants to move forward, they have to find another smaller church. The good news, if you get them congruent, where everybody's on the same page, it works. What's the problem is when the pastor wants to do one thing and the congregation wants to do another. It's not congruent. We found some. And obviously it's not just MCC. Remember those statistics I gave you at the beginning? The majority of churches are pastor-sized churches in America. And people in America tend to like that, obviously. They want the pastor to be, and obviously a lot of pastors like being the center of attention. I told you we're control queens. And we like our audience. So there's something to be said for that. But if the church is having growing pains, it probably means the pastor is going to have some growing pains too, because when you move from one to the other, the transition is where you get stuck. And let's look just for kicks at the next size church. Corporation, 351 plus, because one of the churches in our network is this, corporate. Our church in Houston, Resurrection MCC, is a corporate-sized church. Look at their relationship style. More than 2 worshiping congregations, include half of all members, coalescing by affinity into small congregations of 30-plus people. They have a 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock service on Sunday morning. They have all sorts of groups that meet during the week that are 30-plus people. Their leadership structure is still collaboration. The pastor is the chief executive officer with mythic qualities.
Direct line to God.
I love that. Mythic qualities. I have not grown to that yet. I have to grow into that too. It takes a while to get mythic qualities. For me, that means ain't no way. It's just a myth. They cannot, in other words, they can't do all of that stuff on their own. But rather, it's a collaborative effort. What they, in essence, do, let's go on through the rest of it and you'll see. The staff, there are several ordained staff members, which includes full-time executives in charge of program areas. So just like when I was at MCC Los Angeles and before I came here, I was the minister of congregational care. That was my job, to take care of the care, prayer, share stuff. The programming was the minister of congregational life. She was over 40-plus small group ministries at that church. But neither of, and there was a third ordained pastor that was over the Latino ministries, the Spanish-speaking ministries at the church. But none of us were the CEO. There was one over us. He was the highest paid and had the most power.
Senior pastor.
He was the senior pastor. And we had to,
Bow.
he told us what his vision was, and we made it happen. That was our job. Now, I don't mean he just came and laid the law down. I mean, he worked with us most of the time. Because sometimes, here's the thing, and this is what you will know this if you've ever been over a group before. If you're the leader, you see all of the things, all of that everybody doesn't see, and you have to figure out, sometimes you just have to put your foot down and say, we're going to do it this way. And it does hurt people's feelings sometimes, but it's because they don't see the whole picture. And it's until you've got to get the whole picture. You got to see the whole thing. And sometimes we see things that we can't even tell you about. And that's hard. It's really hard. But sometimes he saw things, and I realized that he may know something that we didn't know. If he came in and demanded something, I knew he knew more than I knew. And that when he was ready to tell us, he would tell us. Because usually, if you'll wait long enough, you'll get the why. And you'll see the bigger picture. But sometimes you have to wait it out. Okay, hold on.
I was just kind of wondering, with the mega churches, in a way I see kind of two different types a little bit. One is they both fit that type of structure, but one is where the pastor is a respected leader and so forth, but is not, I guess, quite as mythic. And that would, an example here in town, I would say, was First United Methodist, with the pastor that senior pastor that was there. Whereas then many of the mega churches that you hear about are the ones, like that are on TV and so forth. The big thing over in Houston, the Swaggart Ministries, the other, and those are the ones. In a way, I almost see, where in some of them the pastor has for lack of a better term, good mythic qualities, and in another sense, almost a clannish, worship the leader sort of thing. I just wondered if there's any comment about that.
Becomes a cult of the pastor.
I think it takes days like today to get people on the same page and realize the structure and getting people to work together for the structure. Because if you don't get people on board, if people don't really know what's going on and then you start changing things, people don't get it. That as you grow, there's a pulling apart. It means letting go of your relationship, your personal relationship with the leader. So some of you that maybe I'm very close to as pastor, if we move to the next level, I'm not going to have as much time to spend with you, which means that you have to share me with other people. But my time would then, if we move from pastor-centered to programming, means that essentially I will be pastoring the other leaders and empowering them. So my time will mostly be spent with them. That doesn't mean I can't do a wedding or a funeral. That means that I can't go hang out all the time. It means that I hang out with that group. And then they essentially become the pastors, lay pastors maybe, but pastors of their prospective groups. And when you start talking about that, there are some people that immediately just put up a wall. Oh no. Because I like it the way it is. And there's nothing wrong with liking it the way it is. Most churches like it this way in America. I don't know about other countries, but in America.
And can a church be a hybrid of pastor and program, so you keep the personal level and why not?
You'll see as we go through this. But already you see, you have to, it's a constant flux of change. Either you're all moving together or you get stuck somewhere. Here's the reason. If you wanted that hybrid of in between, yes, and I see what you're saying. You can't stay at hybrid though. There is sort of a hybrid you kind of go through in the transition. So let's use the word transition because transition indicates movement. Hybrid seems to me to be static. You can't stay there because if you stay there, you're not totally this or totally that, and people are not focused on where they're headed. They're just stuck. Hybrid means stuck to me. You can't have both.
Hybrid to me means the best of both.
Can't do it. You just can't do it. The person in front can't do that. And the congregants cannot expect that. I mean, they can expect it, but they won't get it. They'll be you're right. Somebody said that. You're setting yourself up for disappointment because you can't have it that way. It just doesn't work. It's failure. You just can't. Stagnant. You can't. It would be nice if you could have people that had that kind of energy and personality and could please everybody, but it just doesn't work. You can't. You just can't do it. And I'm not just saying I can't do it. The whole point of this is that nobody can do this. It's just not, it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. That's one of the reasons we're having this, because we've been stuck for 2 years. Stuck. Stagnant. Okay, here's the deal. We have, we're going to take a break. When we come back after lunch, we're going to see how do we get unstuck if we choose to. If we choose to. Note that. That doesn't mean if we're stuck and you like being stuck, we stay stuck. Okay? But keep that in mind, and we're going to see how do we get out of this. Now, just so you know, the rest of this will not take very long. Some of the latest research, if you keep up with my stuff on Facebook, I post a lot of stuff about emerging churches. And one of the when it came down after I had read and read and read and posted and posted and posted, and I didn't post half of what I found on emerging churches. We say emerging churches. That seems to be the latest thing in churches right now. They're emerging into something else, you know. Whatever church is emerging into, one of the things that has come up, the bottom line, Josephia, to respond to what you just said is, it said instead of deciding for people what they want or guessing what they want, how often do you take them aside and ask them what they want? And that's when I came up with the Dream Team. I want to ask them, what is it that you want? What can we do? We know you're drawn here because you come here. But how do we keep you here? How does this become home? So you're absolutely right. You do have to, but in the past, I think churches have been guilty of, this is our product, you like it or you lump it. This is who we are. We make no apologies for it. And if it's working for you, that's fine. But we know that almost all churches are dropping off in attendance in the day we live. That's just worldwide. That's not just, that's not an MCC issue. That is a church issue. And as technology becomes more and more available, people are not interested. You can look at our church services at home. Now, I don't like telling people that as much as I do like telling people that. Because then I have a feeling, some people say, well, I'm not going to church. I can just sit here and get it next week. Well, that's fine if you still write your check and pay for us to be able to pay for it to get on there. But you're missing out and we're missing out on the community part. That's the part. So, having a safe place to come and be a part of a community that I don't have to agree with on every single thing, but that I can share my joys. I can have somebody to cry with me when I'm sad. I can build a bond of friendship if I want to. And if I don't want to, it's okay. I'm still in a safe space. And people will respect that and not judge me for who I am. So, it's the balance. Okay, go to the next slide and let's see what we got here. Well, that's just a big chunk. What all that is really is it puts it all together. Everything you just saw. So we're moving forward. There are 4 dimensions of the congruence theory. Okay. Now what are we going to do now that we got all this information? What do we do with it? The descriptive part is it describes the characteristics of the 4 types. Well, we just went through the morning session to get the description. And now there's a diagnostic part. It allows us to diagnose dysfunctions occurring as a result of incongruence among the 3 elements. Then there's a prescriptive line. It allows us to bring the 3 elements into congruence and restore health and functioning. So what we're looking for is trying to find where we're out of balance and bring it all into balance for where we are today and where we want to go. And then the transforming, that helps us transition a congregation from one type to another, and I guess that should have been added on to the end of that, if they want to. Okay? Keep that in mind. All right? The next slide is a picture of what that looks like. This is the transformational growth grid. It's based on the board of directors, the pastor, the programming, the worship, the facility, and the staffing. Those are the 6 things that it's based on. Okay. There are 2 strategies for addressing pushback against church growth. Uh-oh. Now, some people do not want to grow. Some people feel that is our calling to grow. And I don't know about you, but I grew up in a church that you were made to feel guilty about if you were not evangelizing everyone. The more people you bring in, the more people hear the gospel message, the more people get saved and can go to heaven when they die. That was all it was about. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, it ain't about that for everybody. Even those of us that grew up in it, it's not about that anymore. It is about having a safe community to share our joys and our sadnesses, our celebrations, our funerals, our rites of passage, to share our lives with. Or to be in a community that is doing other things for the community and to say, I want to be a part of that. We have to acknowledge that not every church is called to transition to the next numerical size. You have permission not to want to grow. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that I was so thrilled when that was on there, when they taught that to us, because there are people who simply do not want their church to be. And I will tell you, even on the Dream Team, and you Dream Team people that are in the room, I want you to think back to what people said what, and even what you said. Some people in that group said, I liked coming into this size church because it felt comfortable. It wasn't like the mega churches where you get lost and nobody even knows you. Okay? Some people really like that, and they want it to stay there. And in that number one, we have to acknowledge, I like that. If you like it. If you don't like it, it's okay to say otherwise. But for those people who like it, to be able to say that. Number two, acknowledge that church growth is not just about the numbers. It is not just about how many people are here. It is about all of those other things we talked about a while ago. It is about the numbers is one thing, but how we care for one another, what is organic to this group, and we certainly have a target audience. Although, we may find that we need to broaden that target. And as more and more denominations become accepting of GLBT people, MCC has to regroup its target, re-aim. And of course, the most important part of it is that we're spiritually growing.
Explain organic.
Organic is what is growing up from inside, basically programming. And our identity. What is it that makes us identifiable? What makes us us? That's from the inside out. Just another little flow chart. See that church growth involves all of that. She asked about diaconal. Is the same thing as our care team. It's how we care for one another. It's anything that like a deacon would do in a church. It's about how we outreach to each other, maybe in-reach to each other. Organic is what your identity is about. The identity of our church as opposed to the church next door. We are primarily GLBT people. That's organic. That's what's here for the most part. That doesn't mean everybody is like that. But it also means that for the most part, that's been our target when we're out there trying to bring people in. We meet other GLBT people and say, oh, you're not happy where you go to church, or you haven't been to church in a long time, well, come with me, because here's a place where lots of GLBT people are. Nothing wrong with that. However, sometimes, there's a bullseye. Maybe that's the bullseye, but, on a target, there are other rings. You can spread that out a little bit. I mean, you're here and you're not GLBT. Sorry for outing you. Okay, now this next one is a most important slide. This size transition is the end curve. Here's the deal. Notice on the left side, you have the family size and the pastoral size. On the right side, you have program size and corporate. Well, why can't you just go straight up? Why can't you just build 4 blocks? Well, the problem is that the family size and the pastoral size are single cell. They're organisms. They're like singly led. You're looking to a person to lead, either the matriarch, patriarch, or the pastor. You've then got to transition over to the program size, which would then go up to the corporate size, and that is organization. So it's gone from organism to organization. It's not one person leading anymore. It's lots of leadership. It's people being able to transition from looking at the pastor or the matriarch, patriarch, but in our situation, the pastor, as the sole visitor to the hospital room, or the sole visitor when someone dies, or that we actually have somebody else on staff that can perform a wedding. Okay? I had some friends last night here in town that are going out of state to get legally married, 2 guys. And so they contacted me and said, we would love for you to be the person that does this, but we also know that you're not going to go with us to Iowa. So, we're going there, but do you know the pastor of the MCC there that might be willing to work with us? And I pulled it up on the internet and found that they have on their site 3 people on staff at that church that could perform a wedding. Wonderful news. But do you understand the transition here? You go from family to pastoral, but then you've got to slide over. Not only are you numerically changing, but your leadership structure is changing. Oh, I lost a couple of you on that one. Now look at the next slide and see what you think. Pastor to program is the most difficult transition. In other words, where we are right now to the next place is the hardest of all of them. You can lose the close fellowship and family feeling of a smaller church. It is difficult to afford the staff that you need at this size. Does that sound familiar? Number 3, if you've helped me in leadership or if you've been on the board, you know this is so true. Sometimes it feels like you're big trying to be small, and sometimes it feels like you're small trying to be big. And it's so frustrating because it's incongruent. It doesn't always work. But keep in mind that where we are right now to the next level is the hardest of the transitions. Because not only does it mean the leadership is changing, but the leadership style is changing. It doesn't just mean that for you, it means that for me. It means that the way I conduct business has to be different than the way I've been conducting it. It means that I can't be present at everything and I can't be hands-on and have my finger in every single pie in the church. There's immediate need for subgroup structures. Can we say that that's true right now?
Yes.
The pastor can no longer be the hub of the wheel. The core competencies required in board members changes. So, let's go back to the family size for a second. Barriers to growth in the family size church, because we still have some elements of family size church in us. There's a barrier if you go back to a family size church, which is possible. It is possible. Even at the rate we are right now, we could literally start operating as a family size church. One of the barriers is they generally have short-term pastorates. About the longest you will see, I believe they said it was about 2 to 3 years, and no longer than 5 that a pastor would stay. There's a barrier of mistrust because you don't take time long enough, you're not there long enough to build the trust. There's a barrier of close but closed circles. This is our little group, and we know everybody by first name. This is Cheers. Everybody knows your name, right?
Yep.
And this is my seat. I sit in it every time I come. There's the barrier of mutual comfort. This is my comfort zone, and I've learned to let it mesh with your comfort zone, and we don't get in each other's way. It's all fine. The barrier of active but misguided pastoral leadership. Meaning the pastor can be busy, but it might be misguided because it might be whatever the patriarch or matriarch says, just seeking approval. Or if this person is giving the majority of the money in the offering plate, then that's the only person I can listen to for guidance. That's what happens a lot of times in the family-sized churches. I'm just telling you. Not always, but a lot of times. Size transitions are far more complicated, love this quote, far more complicated than many believe and often filled with pain, resistance, outright sabotage, and inevitable membership disruption. Attempted transitions in congregational size fail more often than they succeed. You know what that says to me is that people are not as informed and they're not as on board. Or they get on board, and this is no lie, and the person is here, and I don't know if he'll even remember doing this. But when I came here and I interviewed the congregation, one of you in this room said to me, when I said, "Do you like the size of the church? What do you want you see?" He said to me, "I want this church to be 15 times bigger than it is today." 15 times. That would be 600 people. About 2 years ago, we started getting a little surge, a little bump in attendance. And a lot of you have come in the last couple of years. And when we started getting all these new people, that same person, and you know who you are, came to me and said, "Pastor, I just don't like big churches. I'm just not happy. I don't know everybody anymore. We got all these folks, and I don't know who they are. I used to know everybody, but I don't know anybody now." Now, let me tell you something. Now, I teased that person, and the reason I'm saying that is because his intention was good from the start, but he hadn't had that experience. Then when he started getting that experience, it wasn't what he thought it was going to be, and he didn't like it. It took him out of his comfort zone. Does that mean he was bad either way? No, absolutely not. And he may still today decide, "I want to move forward and I'm willing to give it a try and I don't want to leave. This is my home and I'll go with you if that's where you want to be, and I'll just have to not know everybody." But here's the other piece of it. If we are to intentionally, strategically, are putting things in place for that to happen, then that means some of the subgroups would be coming into place that kind of take care of that small congregation feeling. Maybe we already have some of that here. Maybe because several of you are involved with Pride Fest. Maybe that's your small congregation. Well, that's not church. Many of the new people have come because of the Pride Fest. and specifically because of MCCBR's representation with the blessing of relationships. That one thing has brought us a lot of members in the last, or a lot of attenders in the last couple of years. It's been amazing. We were willing in a public event to get up and bless somebody's relationship. Well, I want to go see what they're doing in that building over there. Who are these people? And they gave me a certificate. Little things, big impact. Growth can happen, but if we are going to make it happen, I think the reason he said that it fails is because you've got to be intentional, you've got to be constant, you've got to be constantly reminding people we're on this path, we're on this path. And then you've got to put things into place to kind of keep people happy and involved so that they don't lose the cozy, warm fuzzies that they wanted. Or they don't lose the spiritual nourishment that they were getting. But how do you do that? I'm not telling you it will be easy if we decide to move forward. I'm not telling you that at all. And I'm going to already tell you that I'm not sure I have all the answers. In fact, I can tell you that I don't. I have more now than I had when I took this class originally. Thank God for the Stewardship Summit and the Programming Summit that gave me some ideas and, I see how this all works together. But it's not easy. Nobody said it's going to be easy. All right, there are two types of growth. There's incremental growth, that describes the numerical growth within the present size category. And there's the transitional growth, which describes numerical growth that results in a transition from one size category to the next. So, that's the part where I said it's not easy. The easy part is the numbers. And that ain't always easy, but that's the easy part of the two. The transitional growth, being willing to grow with that constant change, that's not so easy. Go back to the six aspects of congregational life. The role of the pastor, the role of the board, the style and the content of worship, amount and focus of programming, the adequacy of the facilities, and the staffing. That's what we started with a while ago. This hasn't changed, but just a reminder to keep those 6 things in mind when we start talking about are we going to stay or transition. 3 most important things to do first. All right, pay attention, folks. See if you have the energy. Improve the quality of everything you are doing. Now, we're pastor-centered, so a lot of that falls to me. But out of those 6 aspects that we just went over, the role of the pastor. So I've got to be a better pastor than I've been being. The board's got to be better at what they're doing than what they've been being. And I'm going to tell you what, they've been stepping it up lately. I'm just telling you, they've been on it. Has it been growing pains? And it has hurt. Just so you know, it has hurt. The style and content of worship. The style and content of our worship is different now than 3 years ago. For those of you that just recently came in, it's a lot different than it used to be. There are some things that are very much the same and some things that are very different. And even your pastor's theology has changed dramatically in the 6 years he's been here, just so you know. And a lot of that came from education classes taught in this church. Woo! It means that we have to be better at programming. So whatever programming we have, now we don't have a whole lot of inside programming right now, but the programming that we have has to be the best. Got to improve, got to do better. Facilities. Make as much use of this facility as we can. We have done the improvements. I mean, as far as the physical plant. But we got to maintain it, and we got to utilize it as much as possible. and staffing. Woe is us. Okay. Focus on the spiritual needs of people. And if the services we've been having lately are any indication, I don't know about you, but I've left services lately in the last few months. I've just felt like I've been to what we called in the Church of God old time camp meetings. You just kind of leave floating. Something great just happened. Whatever name you put on it, something just happened. Something changed inside of me that makes me want to do more, makes me want to give more, makes me want to be more than I am. Increase the productivity of your paid staff. Got to get me busier than I'm being. Here's what I would suggest to you, as Tom pointed out to me recently, or it may have been you, Rick. It's not so much being busier, it's being more productive in the same amount of time. So I'm trying to be work smarter, not harder. Exactly right. Okay, let's look at the next one. The changing role of the pastor in different size categories. Hold on. The role of the pastor related to church size. The small church needs a lover. The medium church needs an administrator. And the large church needs a leader. Now, Rhonda asked for, can't we have the best of both worlds? We are at that I don't want to stay stagnated. What was the word I used? Stuck. The stuck point. We are stuck. That I'm somewhere between a lover and an administrator. But if we need to move forward, it means that I have to leave the lover part. Doesn't mean I don't love you or you don't love me. That's not what that's about. It's the closeness and the one-on-one a lot of times. But an administrator that starts administrating over the programming more. So it's behind the scenes, not so much. Doesn't mean I don't get to preach or any of that, but it means I don't have to lead every single thing that happens. Questions, comments before I move forward?
It's like, though, with the pastor is there, it kind of validates it as real.
In
And
a small
what's
church,
going on.
that's true. And
Well-
if you want to keep it a small church, that's what it has to be.
You know, there I go with the hybrid issue again, because sure, and I've had a pastor who was a great administrator over a small church when we needed, really at that church we needed a lover. But it's like I say, it's like it's real if the pastor's involved. It's like when you did Pig's funeral. Pig had a real funeral. My dog, y'all, had a funeral.
Our dog named Pig.
You know,
He
it
was a
just
sweet baby,
validated
too.
that Pig was important. And
That doesn't mean that the pastor doesn't get to do all of those kinds of things. It does mean that you have to be specific about what role the pastor is going to do. And that is not the preeminent part of it. It doesn't mean that I never get to perform a wedding or a funeral or a blessing of the animals or anything, but it means that we have to think beyond that. And I have to administrate other people to be able to take on, because as more and more people come, I can't physically be available at every single thing, but it doesn't mean I don't provide for it. My role would then be to teach other people how to do it. It's just like being able to teach people how to. I don't give communion to everybody on Sunday, right? Now, some people will move from one side. They'll specifically sit on the other side because in their eyes, only the priest is supposed to do that. And then they call me the priest, you know. But it can be anybody in this church. All right, let's go on to the next slide. The family-sized congregation, their primary expectation is pastoral care. They like that one-on-one, the pastor to show up, pastor to be there for everything. Pastor serves as the family chaplain, serves as a consultant to matriarchs and patriarchs, and provides appropriate worship. Okay, move on. Our size congregation at this point, the pastor and a small group of lay leaders replace the matriarchs and patriarchs, except that our patriarch, and those of you that I've heard mention matriarchs and patriarchs actually are lay leaders. Success requires the pastor to delegate authority, assign responsibility, and recognize accomplishments of others. The congregation responds to reasonable pastoral care expectations. And some days I feel like it's reasonable, and other days I think, oh, could that have waited till at least 9 o'clock in the morning? Did you really have to tell me that at 7? I mean, it was not an emergency. If you're bleeding or dying, of course I want to know. But just so you don't forget to call me later, reasonable pastoral care expectation. 9 in the morning till 9 at night, please. Okay. Success requires strong interpersonal skills and open interactive leadership style. And there's a willingness to give up strong connections to members essential to transition to the program size. And I think that last one is what scares most everybody else to death. Rhonda's not the only one. It scares people. What am I going to have to give up in order to have? Okay. But there's, you see, it doesn't stop when you get to the next level. It just keeps going. Program congregation, their primary emphasis. Now, the reason I really wanted to cover this, you say, well, we're not there. But if you decide to go there, you need to know what it is. So here's what it is. The primary emphasis shifts from personal relationships to planning, recruiting, training, supervising, and evaluating. That doesn't sound warm and fuzzy. Shift is from interpersonal mode to development mode. A lot more of the training stuff, the developing programs. Personal attention and pastoral care are focused only on the leaders. And then they do the pastoral care for the groups they work with. Must be able to pull together diverse elements into a mission statement. We have a mission statement this long. We're going to work on that. We're going to get that changed. Must secure and keep the trust of leaders. Got to get people in leadership that you can handle and that people will follow. You know the sign of a good leader? Somebody follows them. If nobody's following, then you know you probably aren't really called to that. No offense, but maybe you're not called to that. You can't get anybody to work with you on something, there's a reason. Doesn't mean you're a horrible person. It just means you're not the right leader for that particular group. Okay, in the corporate congregation, the pastor becomes a symbol of unity and stability for a diverse and complex organization. They ensure the highest quality of worship. They lead a multiple staff successfully, including allowing others to do things differently than you would. We talked about that earlier. Must be able not only to manage, but to generate the kind of energy a large church requires. In other words, they are a cheerleader. Good going. Oh, let's talk about this. We need to talk about this. Is the church staffed to decline, remain on a plateau, or grow? Now, one of our writers asked that question. I'll ask you that question. Because I know the answer to that question. Okay. Hello. Stuckness. That's the word I should have been using all along. Stuckness is primarily the result of well-intended attempted solutions built into the rules and structures of the system. Solutions that create life-draining feedback loops. Oh, Lord, do help us. Stuckness. I've been in it for 2 years. Moving on. Angles. That does not say angels. Angles of stuckness. There's an impasse in decision making. And y'all, this is my whole life. I even preached about it last Sunday. Told you about that. When I can't decide something, then nothing gets done. It would have been better to make a decision and either succeed or fail, but I get stuck and nothing happens. Stages in the development of authentic community. Emotional constriction. Ecclesiastical narcissism.
That was long.
Oh, Lord. We like it just the way it is, in other words. Addiction. Give her a microphone. And developmentally stuck in life cycle and maturing process. Notice that. What if we said that about an embryo? Developmentally stuck. We wouldn't like that. It would be a horrible, horrible thing.
What does it, I can't even say it, whatever mean? Yes, thank you. What does that mean?
We like it just the way it is.
All right, thank you.
Basic. Ecclesiastical involves all of churchdom. Yes. D-O-M. D-O-M, not D-U-M-B. Churchdom. Ecclesiastical, it has to do with anything church. And narcissism, looking at the mirror and liking what you see. We like it just the way it is. Right now. Let's don't mess with it. It's perfect. We've created this oasis in the desert. Now let everybody out there come find us. That's really what it means.
What do they mean by addiction? Addiction to what?
To the way it is. We've always done it this way. We're stuck here. We're addicted to it the way it is. Don't need to change it. Okay. You ready for another shot in arm? Okay, let's talk about the developmental process. And I love this. By the way, you have several pages on this, and don't panic. This moves pretty fast because some of these, this is the overall view of the developmental process, but we're going to take it down. Let's go on another notch. Let's start with the family and take it even farther. There it is up close. Okay, so the family size church, under or equal to 35 people with a half-time pastor, moving to over 30, or maybe over 35 with three-quarter-time pastor and a half-time music staff. Find a facility that will accommodate growth to the pastor-sized church and do a long-term staffing plan and the board involved in every aspect of the church's life. We've been there. We've done that. And we're moving forward. We've actually moved. We've done all of that. Years before I got here, we've moved beyond. So let's go on to the next part. Okay. We're still under 150 people. Average weekly attendance. That's what AWA means, by the way. Average weekly attendance. Under 150. Should be. This is what we should be. Hear me. This is what we should be. Full-time pastor. Paid. Full-time pastor. Music, half-time if we're below 100 in average weekly attendance. Three-quarter time if we're above 100. We need administrative assistant should be half-time, below 100, full-time, above 100. Our programming, we should have somebody over the programming. One part-time person below 100, one full-time above 100. Right now it's me. According to where we are just, 66, somewhere between 54 and 84. We're getting close to that 100 mark. So pay attention to what we should start looking like. Okay, so what do we do? We need to do a ministry map and begin building programs. Doesn't mean that we're going to stay stuck. Because even if we decide not to go all the way to the next level, we can still do some of these things to get unstuck. Do a ministry map. What does that mean? Sit down and draw out with the dream team. Draw out, where do we want to be? Where is it that we want to go? Okay, and then put some markers down. By such and such a date, we'd like to be to this point. By such, I noticed Reverend Sandy Osteen in Cornerstone. She recently, I saw something in her newsletter about when we have over 100 in worship regularly, not just today, but regularly. That was a milestone for her. Then something else she's already got mapped out in place with her folks. Something's going to happen when they get to that point, which is very powerful. Pay attention. If we map it out together and say by this time, that doesn't put a date on it. It says when we get to 100, here's what we'd like to happen. All right, move that on a little farther. Okay, the program size church, under 350, full-time pastor, full-time music director, full-time administrator, one full-time and one part-time above 200 people. If there are two full-time programming people, three full-time if it's above 100. They have to greatly expand their program offerings, plan for very large worship, plan for program facility, and have a board involved in policy and strategy. That's pretty much a lot. That's a lot to look towards in that transitional thing. Okay? And then the corporate, we'll just briefly cover this, has full-time pastor, full-time minister of music, two full-time administrators, administrative assistants, full-time program person for every 100 worshipers. They expand their staffing plan to build departments, and their board is only involved in strategy. They're really the strategic planning team at that point. Okay, moving forward. Okay, changing the church culture. And this is where some of our fears have come in and our stuckness that we were just talking about. Culture shifts are the hardest changes to make. Culture shifts. In other words, how we think about doing it. It takes more time for people to get on board. It affects more people. It's not just my church anymore, it's our church. And it's not just for those of us who like what it is, but for the new person who is coming in. It challenges leadership to stick with their convictions. It sometimes costs money before it makes money. We all know that, right? It sometimes loses people before it gains people. Yep. There will be some people that say, I can't handle this, I don't want any part of it, I'm leaving. Yep. There'll be some people that just don't have the energy to move forward. There's some people that think I'm too liberal, there's some that think I'm too conservative as pastor. There's some that say, I don't like that worship leader in that particular spot. I'm not having anything to do with that. But my encouraging word is always this. Hang on. Don't fight it, but give it a try. At least try it. You don't know unless you try. Move forward. MCC culture shifts. Each size category will manifest these differently, but these are the things that are specific to our denomination. Going from worship to discipleship. People want to come and worship and have a good worship experience, but are we being discipled enough to know how to move forward, how to bring about more, not just numerical growth, but spiritual growth, all that other growth we were talking about. Being person dependent to an empowered group. Oh, dear Lord. You did my dog's funeral. I'm dependent on you. You played for church one Sunday. I want you to play every Sunday. You picked out real good music last Sunday. Will you do that every Sunday? See where that goes? It just keeps going. But if you empower a group of people to do those same things, you might be surprised. Sometimes it's a good surprise, sometimes it's a bad surprise. But hang on, we'll get there. Oppression, from oppression to liberation. I had a whole sermon on that recently. One generation to multi-generation. We can change ours, what we have right now. It can be even more diverse. Reverend Lily Brock used to have her own corporation, and this was part of her cycle of change. And I just think this is so wonderful. If notice change at the top, okay, that's where we are at this moment. We know something's got to give. We are going to change one way or another, just so you know. We are. We're not going to stay stuck anymore, simply because I'm not going to be stuck anymore. So even if I'm not going to be stuck anymore, that means that I'm changing, and you have to decide where we all fit into that change. But let me tell you what I did. There was loss. Oh my God. Pull up the next one. Loss. Feelings of fear. When we went through this, oh my Lord. I was like, oh Lord, I can't. Oh, I'm scared to death. What are they going to do? And on top of that, I had one person, because the economy just hit Louisiana about that time. And I had one person who was a wonderful giver that said, if I keep my job, I've got to move to another state. Won't be here anymore. That's finances going. This is the business side of it now. Another member who was working at OK Long, and they were like, the governor says, we're going to close this down. I don't know if I'm going to have a job. I may have to go to another state to work. And if I do, I'll be involved in the church that I go to there, not in this church. You talking about fear? I just heard half my budget walk out the door. Seriously. I know that sounds really dramatic, but I'm being as honest and raw and truthful as I can be. It wasn't that they wanted to not be here and not give. They couldn't. Loss. Talk about fear. For those of you that went with me to Atlanta and wondered why I came back and didn't do anything right then and why it has taken so long, now you know. I was like, oh, I can't make any of these changes. I can't talk about doing this stuff when I've got people leaving. Powerful people. I mean church leadership in stewardship of time, talent, and finances. What am I supposed to do with this? So I was cautious, and my behavior paralyzed. I admit it. About a month ago, I preached that from the pulpit. I admitted to you, I was paralyzed. I've been paralyzed all this time. And then doubt set in. Not just loss, but the doubt. Started being resentment. Why'd you call me here to leave me here, God? Skeptical, we're never going to make it. Resistant to any change. We'll just be doing good to make it through another week. Then the next phase, discomfort. Anxious, confused, unproductive. Does this feel like, was I the only one going through this? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. But now notice right there, the next thing is not the next feeling, the next zone was the danger zone. And I confess to you, that this is what happened to me. I never got to the other side of the chart. When I hit the danger zone, I'd go back and start over with the loss. Because another person would come in and say, this is happening. Or I'd go to another board meeting and finances were down. And I'd say again, if I need to take a cut, I will. If I need to go find a second job, I will. I kept circling. I'd get all the way through to that side and I'd get to the danger zone, and every time something else would happen about that moment, and I'd go right back to fear and paralyzation. Okay. But something happened. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was all the new people, the influx of new people over the last year, and your enthusiasm about being here and saying, God made me come here and I can't, this is my church. And that little group right there knows what I'm talking about. Some back here, y'all know what I'm talking about back here. Some of these newer folks, y'all have just gotten here. So but that just, you don't know, your presence pumped me up. And this time got me past it. Well, it also helped that he got a job here and decided to stay instead of move. That helped from the business side. But that was only part of it. That was just business. The spiritual growth for me came with the enthusiasm of the new folks coming in and saying, wow, where have I been? Why haven't I been here before? I don't know. Where have y'all people been all this time? We only been here 30 years. Longer than some of y'all been alive. Oh dear. So something happened. I got past the danger zone and found a little discovery. Something happened. Anticipation replaced fear. But what if? But what if? What if? Instead of we can't, what if we could? Started getting a little creative. Started getting energized. Look at the next phase. Go on. Uh-oh. We're starting to get some confidence. Thinking more pragmatically and hopefully getting more productive. That's what today is all about. We still got to go around. What's the last part? Then we integrate. All of that cycle comes back. So that we get satisfied, we get focused, and we get generous. Finances, yes. Time, yes. Talents, yes. What can I do for you, Pastor? What can I do, church? What can I do, board of directors? What can I do, prayer team?
And I'll just add,
Yes. Oh.
I was raised in a very organized church, and we were called or designated to do certain jobs for a certain amount of time. Then we were released and maybe designated to another job or maybe given a break for a short period of time. And that's kind of how they allowed everyone to have a part in it. But yet, they would find, maybe one person was better at a certain job than another. And anyway, as time went on, I have to tell you, out of the hundreds of people that were in that church, I knew most of them by name. There were groups, there were circle groups, but most of them I knew personally by name, and because of social activities and different things going on in the church, you still remained a very close family church. Mm-hmm. You still felt like family there, irregardless to the changes and the growth that the church had developed over time. We still felt very close and very much like a family.
And I can guarantee you it was somebody behind all of that that was very strategic. And you just mentioned part of the strategy, moving people around. You learn more people when you move around different groups. And the social activities and that kind of thing you do. But you were intentional about making that happen. Okay? Managing through culture shifts, the way we think. Here's how we have to manage. 6 stages. High direction and high encouragement. That means we got to be very specific about what we're wanting to do and then constantly encourage one another to make it happen. 2nd stage, high direction and high encouragement. Isn't that the same thing? Yeah. Makes sense to me. Stage 3, moderate direction and high motivation. Oh, hello. Stage 4, low direction. Oh, we're moving into we got this. And high facilitation. All right, I like this. And then 5, low direction and high empowerment. Loving it, loving it. And then 6 is integration. We have transitioned. There it is. We've integrated it. It's finally come into alignment. But the challenges, and that's what Fran just touched on. Number 1, fear, the role of oppression. White space is bigger. Do you know what that means? If you look on a piece of paper, look on a piece of paper. White space is bigger. On the piece of paper, you have more blank than you have covered. That's scary to people. Decline in membership and loss in membership. If you decide to, whatever change you decide on, somebody's not happy. And sometimes it makes your membership decline. Sometimes you even lose the members. Financial struggle. Sound familiar? Lose sight of the mission. And I want to say this about that. As we get I'm trying to work with Reverend Sandy Osteen to come and work with us on that so that we get on the same page. That's the day we really need your input. All of this will have marinated and you've set, and then where are we going and how are we going to get there? The guiding documents, the mapping, in other words. And then measuring the results too soon. Can't just do it for a month or two and say, oh, well, that didn't work. Sometimes you got to play it out and let it see where it goes. All right, there's some other information there on your sheet.